Hello and welcome to today's podcast. With me and my collaborator today is Tony Dowling. This gentleman has years of experience and passion that both run deep in inbound marketing and specifically being customer centric. They care about what the customer does within the sales process, not being pushy like we used to be in the old days. They're looking more at what is required to make the sale these days. So, without further ado, let's jump into the podcast. Let's discover what this person is all about and what value he can convey to you. See you in the podcast. Are you a business owner? Do you have difficulties understanding digital marketing, SEO, and data? Well, in this podcast, we talk to business owners and discover some of the insights that share their observations, thoughts, opinions, and ideas that will help grow your business, gleaned from years of experience, knowledge, authority in their particular field, and more importantly, the value that it conveys to you. So join us in the Insight Before Action podcast. So I'm joined here today now with Tony Dowling and myself, Andy Woolley. Thanks for having me, Tony. Nice to be on our podcast together. Obviously, what we're going to talk about today, we proposed an agenda, is how to get more sales and leads without being too salesy. And I think that is a big thing these days. People turn off very much as soon as you start going down that road. So it's finding the subtle art of selling, but in a way that is conducive to both you, the person trying to get the sale, and the person who's actually going to buy into that product or service. So what's your sort of thoughts on that, Tony?
Yeah, I think that's it's spot on. I think I've even gone so far as to say, I mean, it's a bit headliney, but I think sales is finally dead. I think sales, as people might remember it, perhaps if they're a little bit towards my end of the demographic, sales that is taught, sales training, is miles away now from what is actually required. I think the consumer boot, or rather, the boot is on the other foot, and it's on the consumer's foot, and that really has relegated old style, old sales thinking to the point where I don't think it's even useful anymore. I would agree 100%.
No, I mean, I'm like you. I'm of a few more mature years, and I do come from a culture where the ABC rule of selling was applied to us: always be closing. And I remember even working in one agency, and that's exactly the terminology they used. Is that's how we want you to be in the meeting. That rather than have a productive meeting and talk to the client, the prospective clients, and then come away with a call to action of where you can take it next that's beneficial for them. They much prefer that you're trying to nail them down to a contract and sign them. And for me, that always felt uncomfortable anyway, because it's not my nature to be aggressive like that. I'm quite shouty and loud anyway. I think that's the art of being Welsh.
Possibly, yeah.
But I don't think it's nice to back a person into a corner. I think we all have that ideology of the double glazing salesperson, and I think that's tainted the market for forever, to be honest.
Sorry, Andy, I'm interrupting you. I think that's absolutely right. And as a young salesperson, I very much took my sales career very seriously, because I quickly identified, I did physics at university, and I identified I'd make more money selling than I would as a physicist. And it was the first thing that struck me was how much everybody hated salespeople. And that car salesman or double glazing salesman that's the iconic image, the slightly sweaty, ill-fitting suit, rather desperate probably, like there's a character in The Simpsons. There are plenty of characters, particularly in 80s and 90s sitcoms, lots of cultural references to that salesperson, and I hated it. And I think, fortunately, it's finally dead, and that's actually been driven by the internet. One of the many changes that the internet has brought to us, good and bad. I think this is probably a good one.
No, I totally agree. I think there's still some industries that sort of dwell on it, where it's a numbers game, call centers and things like that, which I understand that's that environment. And obviously there needs to be some sort of return on investment, because that is, getting those leads predominantly that convert to a sale. I understand it. But for the vast majority of us that run our brands, our businesses, I think, no, we take a different approach. And I think going back to what you referenced there, the dodgy salesperson for the cars, oh my gosh, yes, I heart for those. I think where the consumer has become much more savvy and the internet has really given them that is trust. Trust in reading the third party information like reviews, testimonials, case studies. And I think that new thinking of how do we build a relationship based on trust, and it's very hard to build those bridges, but it's very easy to break them.
I think we've always relied on trust in sales. I think, but never more so. And I think that was the big issue salespeople had, is customers often thought that trust had been abused. Yeah. I think if you can summarize old thinking sales, it's probably to overwhelm people with compelling reasons to buy. And then if you don't deliver, the ultimate sin, that's where the trust goes. Now, of course, trust is a different thing, and again, I think driven by the internet and driven by the media talk an awful lot about misinformation and about Russian bots and about all this sort of stuff. But people aren't stupid, and they become increasingly discerning. And my he's only 16. He spots fakery and dodginess on the Xbox instantly, on Instagram instantly. He knows who to share with, who not to share with. So trust has become probably the single most important commodity online today.
Yeah.
Now, it's very difficult to build trust. And selling isn't the way to do it. Selling absolutely isn't the way to do it. And overwhelming people with those compelling reasons. Adam Grant talks about this in Think Again. Actually our position probably becomes more entrenched. The more somebody tries to persuade us against something or to do something, the more unlikely we become to do it.
Yeah.
And you see that in the culture wars and in politics and so on, but absolutely in sales. If you go and sniff at a car and bang, your salesperson descends, you're like, stay away.
You want time to sort of measure something or gauge it within your own space, your own.
Absolutely.
Before the salesperson. You understand they've got a job to do, of course they have, because their managers are watching and they're saying, well, there's a customer over there, you can't ignore them, and they might have a pertinent question. And sometimes that does happen, of course, like when I've been in PC World and somebody comes over and says, do you want any help or anything? And to be fair, they're pretty good if you say, no, I'm all right, I'm just looking. They back away. So I think there is a culture shift in the sense of when you need to push, because you need to make the sales. Of course, every business needs to make a sale. Even clients that I've spoken to over the years, like charities and stuff and that, and say, we don't sell. Of course you do. Every business sells to stay in business. Even if it's selling the like and the share or the brand awareness, it's still a sale because you want to convey some value that you're going to benefit from. But I think it does hark back to what you said there. It's developing that relationship and developing trust, that you embrace the customer more and then let them make their own decision. You don't need to push them across the line. They can do that for themselves.
Yeah. And it's even, less is more. You'll see it once you start to practice it, once you back off, because I'm the same as you described. I'm big and bouncy. I've got a golden retriever. I'm pretty much like the human version of the golden retriever, especially when I meet new people, and I get really excited. I'm quite experienced, and I often see a solution for somebody before they see it themselves.
Yeah.
And I got a terrible habit of going, you've got to do this. This is what you've got to do. And like what we were just saying, people are, whoa. Yeah. So it is about less. It is about backing off. And you find, it's about, I'm sure we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, but it's about serving the customer now, not about selling the customer.
Yeah. Exactly.
And if you are able to do that and start that trust, that journey, because it's got to be backed up by you delivering, and it's got to be backed up by you ongoing caring for the customer. It's got to be backed up for when they come back again and they have the same experience, But it literally becomes that. It becomes about serving that customer and that consumer much, much more than it is ever about selling these days.
Yeah. It comes back to the analogy I was always told is, if somebody's into football, they'll follow you 100% and they'll digest everything you're talking about football. But if they were never into football to start with, they're never going to follow you. So it's knowing the intent of the customer, or as in marketing terms, it's their wants and their needs and identifying that. But pretty much we got clever tools to do that these days, more online, without having to sort of, bombard them with information they don't want. Plus, they got the real power. Since the likes of GDPR and that have come out, if they don't want something, you can just unsubscribe and go, leave them alone. Which don't get me wrong, is probably good, because I still get a barrage of emails every single day for link building, guest posting, SEO services, everything. But clearly they don't know what my skill set is, because they've realized, do I need that? In some cases, maybe.
Yeah, there's no research that goes into that, and it touches back on what you've said. There are lots of businesses, probably the vast majority of businesses and salespeople, haven't actually transitioned to this thinking yet.
Yeah.
There's a famous story about P&G back in the day. So this is probably early 2010s, where they'd gone down the tunnel of targeting, advertising targeting. So digital was this big. It's not digital anymore. It's just advertising, isn't it? But back then it was digital. Was this massive solution to everybody's ills? Because you can target Andy or Tony or women or men or professionals, young, old, and therefore get so much more bang for your buck. But again, the reality is, even when you do that, you're still working on a diminishing return. You're still ratcheting down. So actually, it proved more efficient to throw the net as wide as possible, because the conversion at the bottom was still bigger than the conversion at the bottom of the targeted funnel. So Procter & Gamble actually moved away from targeted advertising for quite a good while and went right back to broad brushstroke stuff. And I think this is the challenge we have as sales professionals, talking to businesses, training businesses, that in many ways it's easier just to spam the shit out of everything, just to call 100 people, just to buy 10,000 email addresses, because you're going to get something.
Yes.
The approach now must, especially what we call it the inbound sales approach, the approach now is very, very different. And it's about research, it's about understanding your market, it's about niching, and it's about serving. But it's hard work. It's difficult to do. It takes a degree of expertise. It takes a degree of commitment. When actually, well, screw it, I'll just send 10,000 emails, and out of the one or two.
No, I do see that there is common sense in there on that broad approach. It reminds me very much of the book I read from Steve Morgan, the Anti-Sell book. It's on Amazon. It's a brilliant book about not being too salesy. Literally, he reflects it of like going to some of the networking meetings, and he specializes in SEO. Is most of us do the same mistake over and over again, is we go to these business breakfast meetings or meetings where we have a similar brotherhood or sisterhood of people with the same skill set. But the problem is, you're not going to sell to them because they're already converted. You've got to go to the alien audience, the ones that may or may not. And that's where the broad element comes in, is that I do get it. I mean, like with Cultec, where I work, when we do probiotics, sometimes, yes, we have a niche, we have our email marketing, but sometimes just putting things out in social media, because you never know when somebody is going to cross that line, or something might suddenly be relevant to them. I mean, the analogy with football, I never followed football for years, but then my daughter played it, and I became a football referee. It's when that switch is turned on, of it becoming relevant, and all of a sudden something I totally ignored becomes totally relevant, which is why I'm watching the Euros at the moment.
Absolutely, and we call it the buyer journey, and you can simplify. There are lots and lots of models. I used to learn about the Lavage and Steiner model and the Dagmar model and ADA and so on. But very broadly, you've got awareness, consideration, and decision. I like that. It's really powerful, right? So awareness is that pre-realization phase, isn't it? Awareness, or maybe the state I'm in where I'm becoming aware that I have an issue and that needs to be solved. Consideration is, let's go online, let's talk to the review sites, let's talk to our friends, let's talk to, let's not, by the way, let's not talk to salespeople, because we don't want to get sold. We want an honest review of what's going on.
That's where we're looking for the third party information then. Yeah,
exactly. And then decision, which is probably the closest bit. And it fascinates me where even with all of Facebook and Google and website technology, even today, even Google's much heralded intent data, you're still looking at conversion rates in single figures. There's going to be something going on here. You know, as an old media person, I used to sell my audience in the hundreds of thousands, and then when I became a website publisher, in the millions.
Right.
You know, and it was kind of like you were actually targeted within the audience. Now Google is saying, well, you know, we know what people are searching for, so we can put your ad in front of them. Wow, that's fantastic. And SEO, you know, if you know what people are searching for, you can optimize your site, and amazing, sounds brilliant. But you're still only converting single percentage points of your audience. It absolutely fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And it's down to, I think, that catalyst that you talked about, that trigger event, you know.
Yes.
Once people, and that's where the trust comes in and the relationship comes in. Because when you've got that with them, when that event actually happens, you're the one that they think of. You know, 'twas ever thus.
Don't get me wrong, you've seen the evolution of the internet as much as I have over the last 20, 30 years. And to be fair to Google, I mean, the last one they brought out in 2018, the EAT policy, the expertise, authority, and trust, I think they're trying to really hone down on what that intent is. Because to date, there's been too many affiliate marketers and SEO managers that are manipulating the internet. So basically, if you wanted to find a six-legged dining room table, you'd probably find one on the internet. But we all know that dining room tables tend to come with 4 legs as opposed to 6. So there's a heavy lot of manipulation. And okay, Google's kind of at fault for that in some senses. It says that, you know, it likes organic traffic and paid traffic as well. But in that very essence, that is manipulation. Because it's the David and Goliath. If I'm a big, you know, if you've got a big boy compared to a little boy brand, and they've got deeper pockets and more resources, aren't they distorting the market and therefore making themselves more appealing to the target audience, but not necessarily the best solution or the product or service for the target audience? It's just that they have more resource. That's manipulation 101. It's always been around. It's been around for decades, even before we got into digital marketing. It was there with traditional marketing in the 50s and the 60s. But now we're seeing it in Google's trying to adapt. It's trying to understand from, and probably the right way, to be fair, it's looking at it from the consumer's point of view, is what's their intent? And you mentioned it earlier with the awareness, consideration, and then the action. And very much, I see that as the sales funnel for intent. You have the informational intent, which is predominantly what the internet is. So when I'm searching for something, you know, how do I fix a leaky tap? Then it's a question that's 9 times out of 10 being answered. And you'll either get a rich snippet coming back, or you'll get something that's been suitably positioned there for that right intent. Now, hark back 10 years ago, and there was every chance you'd have an advert or a cloaking website for Viagra, which is where the internet is. So I see it's becoming a better proposition, but I think search engines, Google predominantly, they've got a long way to go, but they're trying to align themselves to more what the consumer is looking for. And I got to be honest, I personally, when I search, and I search every single day for anomalies all the time to answer the problems I'm trying to solve for myself, for my own portfolio, and there for clients, I find I'm still wanting to find those right answers. I had one yesterday where I did a video and uploaded it, and my DaVinci stopped working, and it was down to drivers and, you know, narrowing down on the forums. And I suddenly had that euphoric moment and realized, oh yeah, it's because I introduced a third monitor a month ago on my computer, and that switched the primary monitor to a secondary monitor, but I couldn't find that information. So I thought, well, you've got to do your sort of conscience sound. You've got to put that information out there, because there'll be a point where someone's in a similar boat where they've added a second or third monitor or more, and then think, well, my software's not working now, and there's a rhyme and reason for it. And what I do feel, and this is more not just relevant to consumers, but also search engines, because I lump them together. They're the two masters we all have to adhere to, because we all run media companies these days before we sell our products and services, is that I need to make sure that that information can be found on the internet to serve the consumer, or the reader, as it were, but the shelf life on it is very, very short. And I think that's the danger I'm seeing more nowadays. Lifetime values are getting shorter. It's getting harder to turn a buck, as it were. What's your feelings on that?
I agree, and I think in the real world as well as the search engine world, this last year especially, I've heard a lot of people talk about how difficult it is to sell, and I found that myself, you know, as a veteran sales and marketing person. It got tough, you know, for all sorts of reasons. And I would I would never bet against Google. That they've got a pretty cool business plan. Let's let's employ all the cleverest people in the world.
Yeah.
But there are clearly bits that are still missing. And I think that timing thing is one. So on a level, as a student of advertising, particularly, strikes me how similar the approaches are today to what they were to the 50s soap adverts that you talked about. Share a voice equals share a business. And as you said, at one point, that didn't matter really how you achieved that share of voice. And I do see us, and maybe it's the optimist in me, I do see us striving to get better, for advertising standards to improve. I mean, it's not talking about ad tech. My God, that's a whole murky world of itself. But search getting better, more reliable, more trustworthy, because it has to, because it's as we were saying, it's the direct counterpoint to what's going on online. I know we think the world is full of idiots who believe everything Donald Trump says and what have you, but it's not, and they're just the ones who shout the loudest. Most of us are getting increasingly discerning. Most of us are increasingly scared, or not scared, maybe cautious about what we're hearing and what we're listening to. Is this true? I know it's not everybody, but
no, but we don't take things just on face value.
And that will continue. Data protection legislation points to that. There's a whole load of stuff that's wrong with the internet in there, and it's easy to talk about that. But I do believe it gets better. I do believe, at heart, it's aimed at serving the consumer, and that can only be a good thing.
No, I totally agree. I think it's got a long way to go. I mean, you've only got to look at like BERT that came out a little while ago, which was see if I can get this right, because they love their acronyms, they're designed for the developers. Bidirectional encoding representations for transformers. Basically, it could read the text backwards. Right. Well, when you consider, I think that came out in 2018, but when you consider human beings can skim a piece of text, we can read backwards, forwards, we can just pull out any sort of word that sort of jumps out at us. We can do things that AI will never do, because AI is built in maths. Maths can always beat maths, and therefore human beings will always do it better. There are occasions where it might do something better because it can do it quicker, but by all accounts, human beings just can make connections, or what the internet talks about all the time, that latent semantic indexing. We make connections far, far easier. And trust, which is a feeling, you can quantify it through your surveys and your polls and things like that, but it's not the same as the gut feeling that you have, whether you like somebody, where you feel they're being honest, where you're looking at the micro expressions. The internet provides as much as it can, and I think it's got a long way to go, and I do commend it for the effort it's making, because it's no easy thing. If I had the remit and someone said, right, you make it better, I'd be thinking, right, well, okay, how would I do this? And I do take on board like what Amazon did in '96, where they brought out reviews, and we're all thinking of them, why would you do that? You're going to get bad reviews, it's going to affect your sales. But now look at it, we all trust things like that. When we go to book our holiday, we're all skimming the stars before we even look for the relevance, which is where we're missing the picture of somebody who's given a 1 star. And I'll give you a classic example. I just bought a wood chipper 2 months ago, and I kind of knew some of the bad things that come with wood chippers. They jam, they're not commercial, they're smaller, but you know what, for the home it would be ideal. But I still read those 1 and 2 star reviews to give me an idea that was my only concern that I had to worry about. So I was happy enough to make the purchase, bought it, used it, more than happy with it. But I think you've got to do your own research to truly understand whether elements you pick out from the internet are relevant to you.
Yeah, I think that context is vital, and that's another difficult one for the AIs to get right. And linking it back to the sales thing, the successful salesperson spends as much time qualifying the customer out as they do qualifying them in, because the ultimate is the ultimate thing we should be chasing here is customer success, right? Yeah. So customer satisfaction for sure, but customer success, in other words, they bought a thing off me that did the job they wanted doing. Yeah. Because then they're going to leave a good review, then they're going to tell their friends and so on. And when it comes to things like you talked about the search that you're undertaking, and I do this as well, because there are various things I'm super interested in, and it seems that once you get really drilled down deeply into an issue, particularly like an IT issue or something like that, there's less and less information for you to see on Google, you know, because it's so specific. You know, it might be a string and a string and a string and a string and a string. And
super granular.
Exactly. So what do you do? Well, then you usually talk to somebody, right? You usually go and ask for somebody who's cleverer than you are, or more informed than you are, or just who you know. Do you know anyone who can help me with this? Do you know anyone who can help me with that?
Yeah.
And that's where that trust thing comes in. So the salesperson who's basically said, you don't want to buy that, because from what you tell me, it's the wrong thing for you to buy, is the one who gets the return business. Because when that person is in the right place to buy that thing, where are they going to go?
Yeah.
You know, or the business person, the entrepreneur, and it kind of relates almost to influencers, yeah, but who sets themselves up as that thought leader, horrible word from five years ago, is the one who's going to get consulted, you know, and the this is why influencer marketing clearly is so powerful. It started with Amazon's reviews, became Trustpilot, and so on and so on. And now basically, if I like and trust that person, that influencer, and they tell me to buy the new Call of Duty or a Peugeot or whatever it is, I'm just going to take their word. It's going to have more weight, because of that trust element. Because search will only go so far. And it's funny because, again, related back, Google is basically classified advertising, and classified advertising has always been massive. And you know, when I was running newspapers, it was our richest source of income. And it basically depends on people going, where can I find one of these things?
Yeah.
That's what it is. You know, display advertising, on the other hand, is a little bit more esoteric. You know, it's a bit more about brand, and there's a bit more about position in the marketplace, and there's a bit more about serving and teaching and things like that as well. So, you know, again, 'twas ever thus, or at least in my ancient sort of brain, I draw those parallels. It's just that the technology is getting better. You know.
It is, to be fair. You mentioned it there, like reviews like Trustpilot, FIFO, and there's many different of these, like independent. But I know that they can be manipulated to a certain extent. Only last week, I know that Google and Amazon were called out for the number of fake reviews that they need to address. How do you see that sort of, you know, being cleansed on the internet to provide honest advice?
Yeah, again, I wonder if it's a problem that needs to be solved, because I do see a time where we're all verified. We've all got a tick at the side of us.
Yeah.
That, you know, as a potential way forward. So just as a celeb, you might know that the celeb is the person you think it is, or that thought leader is the person you think it is. Then all of us, I think, we'll have to get to a point where we achieve a standard and maybe an ongoing behavior online that is reasonable. You know, so it is us. It's a real name. It's a real person. And if you do end up like slagging somebody off or attacking somebody, then it's instantly traceable. Much harder to create fake accounts and so on and so on.
Yeah.
But again, when it comes to the Trustpilot stuff, it's context. We all search for those 1 or 2 star reviews. Let's just check. You know, this customer's got 4,900
sacrifice for them.
Yeah, totally. And we build a picture because
I went on holiday and the nursery closed at 7 o'clock, and now that's ruined my evening. What am I going to do with my kids?
Exactly.
Yeah, and love those type of reviews.
We smell them a mile off. We get emails that we never bothered to answer from Svetlana, and we get direct messages that we never bothered to answer. We just block. I had the first time ever, a dodgy one on LinkedIn.
Right.
LinkedIn has been really good, but this was something about your missus, not your missus or my missus, just
in general.
It was a real, so that kind of. I always used to think of the Twitter, what do they call it, the Twitter fire hose. That's the internet, and it's like just shit, just spraying everybody with.
Yeah, but you're right. LinkedIn is pretty good like that. It doesn't.
Yeah, it has been very good.
I mean, I think purely because you separate the audience. If they want a voice, they tend to be on the likes of Facebook, and then anything and everything gets, comes out. But LinkedIn, people are a bit more thoughtful.
Yeah. You are you on LinkedIn as well, aren't you? And you're you, and you're verified, as it were, and you're linked to your business. So you have to be more responsible on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Whereas
Facebook, you could be anybody, and and gone are the days where you have Facebook for social and LinkedIn for professional. You can't think like that anymore. But anyway, I think we will.
Well, you touched on it earlier there about the mindset shifting towards more authentication Obviously, we had the SCA rules that came out in, I think it was 2018, 2019, strong customer acquisition, which is obviously for things like, your one-time passwords, your bank accounts, and you have either the push notifications or the biometrics. Now, a couple of weeks ago, you had in the news regarding the amount of like celebrities or sports persons that were having all the racist abuse and stuff like that. And as they were saying, the social media channels are not doing enough to step up to control. And the way to do that is literally you can't have an account without being authorized. And authorized in the sense of like, to a certain degree, like PayPal, you have to go above and beyond to prove who you are with validation of like a passport or driving license. And that way then you become accountable. Because I had it many years ago. I run 2 very big eBay shops, and I closed them both down because the platform did not value suppliers. No matter how well you run your company, how big, how much service you put in, and how much time and effort to build their brand, they didn't value you. It was all about the consumer. And then eventually people leave in their droves, which I did. And I see that to a certain extent now with Amazon. Google's going down that path as well. You have to realize there's 2 people in this relationship for it to work. And yes, protect the consumer because there's enough people out there who want to take their money. But likewise, you need to protect the suppliers to make sure there is that diversity in supplier. Because even on Amazon, I've been surprised when I shop for things and I can't find them on there. And then I'm jumping over to eBay and I'm lucky if I can find 1 or 2. And then my third point of call is just going to Google and seeing what comes up. And then I'm surprised just how hard that can be sometimes.
Yeah. It's funny again. I don't want this to be a retrospective of the last century, but you think about somebody like Sam Walton, who was the founder of Walmart, and he's a quirky guy, he apparently, right up until the time he retired, would drive to the office in his pickup and his dungarees and his Stetson, but the secret, as he would have it, and as commentators have described, is that he absolutely had every single person who worked there, he had their back, right? Yeah. So it's interesting, the duality or the dichotomy there. They were customer focused, they were customer centric before customer centric was a thing, driven by the consumer and so on and so on. But there was a nuance or a sophistication within that was about being behind the staff, being behind the people who were actually selling, right? So the old, look after the staff and they look after the customer. Exactly that. But to the point where even the lowliest assistant, checkout operator knew the company and Sam had their back. If a customer came in and started acting like an arse, then they knew the company would be behind them.
Yeah.
Again, that's not for doesn't feel like something Facebook would manage, does it? It doesn't feel like something Amazon could manage. That nuance, that sort of almost sophistication.
You see it in a physical solution, you don't see it in an online solution. 2 parts to that. The first part is the way that we treat salespeople or whoever's in a role of selling. I do think that the stupid analogy, and this is the second part, and it's always been stupid in my book, is the customer is the king. And I think that is wrong. It's not, because that very analogy says, so if he's an idiot, he's right. No. At the end of the day, we give them the benefit of the doubt because obviously they're in a position of, power and obviously benefit of, like, they might be right. And you go in, like problem solving, like any sort of thing in customer service, you give them the benefit of the doubt. But there's 2 sides to every story. That's what my gran always told me, is it takes 6 of one, half a dozen the other to cause an argument. It's never a single person in that argument. There's always a minimum of 2. So therefore, you need to listen to both sides of the story and then come down on the side that you feel needs to be supported. And I do commend then companies where they stand behind employees and say, no, you did the right thing there, because that customer was being an arse. I've seen it even when I've been in the McDonald's drive-through and a car in front of me is giving the person at the window such a bollocking because they didn't have enough salt on their fries. And I'm thinking, get real, you imagine you're in that person, that's the type of person that's in your face today. And they're just talking, for want better word, shit. They're just literally giving you hassle for no reason because they're having a bad day. Bless people like that, because you know what, we are all cogs in the machine, and people that have that I am status, you know what, round the corner you may fall down and rely on other people.
So we see this.
Humility, I think, is a good thing. It's the one
100%.
thing that's not on the internet.
No, and we see this in the sales, in your progress as a salesperson, if I could even still call it that. You know, McDonald's is a service industry, and you're absolutely right. You know, when you treat those people badly, and salespeople especially, are notoriously badly treated, especially in the EMEA rather than US, where they have a little bit of a better standing. But in Europe, salespeople are, you know, a bit of a joke. Well, what do? They act out. Why? Because they get squished by everybody. They get squished by the customer. They get squished by the management, especially by the management. So what do? Well, they, of course, they don't care. They act out. They're protecting themselves and so on. As you move up, if up is the right word, and you become a more consultative seller, the service aspect of it becomes more important. As we were discussing, your ability to serve becomes more important. But as does your ability to argue, and professionally and proactively and positively, but you're a doctor, you're a consultant, you're somebody who's telling somebody the right solution, because customer success is the be all and end all, even if that means, no, this isn't the right thing for you to buy, or don't buy it that way. Price is really interesting. Price is one of the easiest ways to position a product that we've ever come across. And interestingly, the most expensive things we immediately assume are the best things, whether they're a Rolls Royce or whatever they are. So, when salespeople get shaken on price, it's a really massive warning sign to the customer, and you see people going, oh, well, I can get you a 20% discount because of X, Y, Z. And the customer's going, oh, why don't you just come in at the 80% price in the first place then, and I'd rather not.
You kind of think that sounds like too much of the sales patter.
Totally.
You're a unique customer, valued and all that, and you kind of think, nah, I think I've heard this enough times before, dear valued customer, and you're thinking, one of a million on my energy supplier, and I'm not really seeing it. I think
it all comes back. Sorry, Andy, it all comes back to that cycle of abuse. At the bottom where the customer is being abused, in fact, everybody is being abused, probably by the organization, through to the epitome of the modern organization, where customer is king for sure. But there is this is frictionless sales. The sales process itself is totally frictionless from end to end, really.
Okay, so you mentioned the frictionless selling then. I like that terminology. Just before you give me an explanation as to what that is, what you were talking about there, where you were taking the salesperson is taking the consumer through a process, which is something you don't really get on the internet, to be honest. And the only reason I make that point is I do think there is a massive place for traditional marketing that people still miss. It can be such a godsend for part and parcel of your touch points out there, for things like workshops, training, exhibitions, actually talking to that brand and feeling whether you're going to build that relationship with them, and obviously develop the trust, that secret ingredients. I think you won't get that on the internet. There's a point that, yes, you can watch videos and a corporate video per se, but that tactile approach of actually talking to somebody that you can make a connection with, and hopefully the person that will be your account manager, is bags. For me, that's a prescriptive type of selling, is that it should be this, followed by that, like when we've worked in agencies and things like that, and you've met the customer, and that's your exploratory meeting, right? And then you follow it up and you give a proposal, and then you follow that proposal up then with a confirmation, and then hopefully you get them across the line, and then you start doing the work. It's very much a prescriptive process. Now, you brought a terminology in there called frictionless selling. Can you give me a better understanding of what that is?
Yeah, so it's a term that effectively, or the movement, if I can be so bold, the movement is about recognizing these things, these trends that we've been talking about, right? And the fact that the customer is king. We're here to serve from that perspective. People don't like selling. Sales is dead, and so on. So you've then also, we both talked about the sales process, and that sales process is often described as a sales funnel. You might even have used that term yourself there, Andy, earlier on. And we usually talk about.
It wasn't the rugby one. It wasn't the
No,
rugby
no.
one. It was the sales
Exactly.
funnel.
It was the sales funnel,
Yeah.
and the salesperson or even the marketer is, their objective is to move.
Yeah.
Which is probably the wrong word, but is to move the person through the funnel, right, from stage to stage until they squirt out as a sale at the bottom of the funnel. And the old adage, you put more in the top, you get more at the bottom. There's all the stuff that we've been covering. So frictionless sales aims on considering the process as more of a flywheel. And it actually, it sort of starts at the end, or I like to start it at the end when I talk about it. And I like to start at the end of the after sales, the customer service and the customer success stuff, right? Because we know absolutely the best salespeople for your organization are going to be satisfied customers, without shadow. For all the reasons that we've been talking about, right? So if you're able to, let's say, add force to the bottom of the flywheel, then the flywheel starts to spin, okay? Then if we add force again at the top of the flywheel, as it were, which is on the sales side, we have these two forces moving and supporting each other, and creating a momentum in the flywheel, because the flywheel is this weighted disc, and once you get it going, it's easier to keep it going, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And in that process, we also want to remove friction from the flywheel as well. So the friction comes in at sales and comes in at the customer service and the delivery aspects of the sales process. So the more frictionless those experiences can be, the more easy it is to get that flywheel to spin. So rather than this kind of one hit, squirt them through, shit them at the bottom.
It is, yeah, rinse and repeat.
Rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
We have this idea where what we're actually going to do is going to look after the people who are coming through our process primarily. That's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to serve at the top of the funnel. We're going to use Google. We're going to use content. We're going to use social and all the things that we're going to use to raise our profile and to do all that stuff. But we're going to really look at, not only are we going to look after people, we're going to actively search for ways to reduce friction in the process. Now, there's three aspects to that, to this whole thing, one of which is hugely challenging. And I do wonder if organizations will ever really understand. So the first one is what we call sales enablement. So this means allowing salespeople the tools to do their job, right? So think about that salesperson we just talked about, who's getting squished from above by the manager and pressured from below. This is somebody who's got the information, they've got the technology that they need, and so on and so on. So they can actually do their job and they can do it efficiently, thus removing friction.
Yeah.
The middle point, this is the bit where everything falls over, is the alignment phase. And aligning your sales organization with your consumer is extraordinarily difficult for businesses to get their heads around, much less actually do.
Yeah.
Because businesses start from this prospect, this idea that, how am I going to win today? Right? How am I going to hit my sales target? How am I going to hit my marketing target, hit my ROI? How am I going to reduce my costs and so on and so on? There's almost this competition every day to survive or even to win, right?
Yeah.
Whereas an aligned organization goes, how do I help my customer today?
Right.
How do I make my business more aligned with what they require? So the perfect example, right? We both built websites, built many websites, I'm sure, but it's trying to convince your customer to put their bloody prices on the website.
Yeah.
That is a perfect example of consumer alignment, right? What are people using the internet for? To find things out. They come to your website. What is probably the number one thing they want to know? How much your product or service costs.
Yeah.
What's the last thing they're going to find on your website? Your prices. It's bananas, bonkers, insane. And when it comes to particularly, encouraging businesses to be transparent about their pricing, you were talking about this earlier before we got on the call, actually saying to somebody, well, this is how we price, this is how we structure that pricing, this is how we do this. And that's what people want to know.
Yeah.
So that alignment with the organizational values and the consumer is extraordinarily difficult. So true frictionless sales is very difficult. And then the third aspect is about, as it always is about education. It's about teaching salespeople to be better salespeople, teaching your customers to be better customers, and teaching the organization to be a better organization. You know? So I think of it as a movement. I think it's where sales is going to end up. How long it takes, I don't know. But I do it in my business, and I try to teach my clients to do it as well.
Yeah.
And for me, it's just the way forward. You know?
Yeah. Oh, that was a lot to take in there, because my head is flooded with three things. The first one is I totally agree with you. You're educating more than you're actually selling. In doing so, and I can say hand on heart without sounding big-headed, I've not had to look for work for a number of years. It's come to me purely because, like, and this is absolute gospel. I had a phone call earlier, another inquiry coming through for my Want SEO agency. I don't have the time, but I wouldn't push that customer away without giving some nuggets to them. And we had a 20-minute conversation, and I said, you need to do this, this, and this. You know, build up a website, do a GMB. He does waste management, local service, but also then if you want some short wins, because that's going to take 6 to 12 months, jump on the Nextdoor apps and Gumtree and go on there, and people are always looking for trades. Somebody will do bits and pieces for them. So you've got that sort of yin and yang effect, got something in the short term, but something in the long term. Now that leads me to the second part. The long term is really where most brands are never focused. Even agencies are not like that. They really hark back to the days of the ABC of always be selling, is that they have the sales funnel, they have their pipelines, they convene their meetings every single week and say, right, what have you done, Jim? What have you done, John? And then they're looking at, basically, it's all about what a figure is on a bottom line. But that doesn't really tell you the state, the condition of that business, how far really along the line. Yes, and you can quantify it, and there are gauges to do that, you know, through CRM. But I feel that is disingenuous to actually the building of trust and sales. It becomes too clinical, and you lose the actual tactile approach of why a customer will talk to somebody over the phone or somebody in person. Is that human element is leaps and bounds. I've forgotten what my third one was. Oh no, my third one was something that you mentioned there about the price, and mentioning it quite early. Now it does make me think, when it comes to like e-commerce sites, the price should be much easier to find, shouldn't be hidden. You know, it should be up there. Be proud of the price, because everything else is a motivator behind it to get you there. There was a good series I watched with Christo, who owns the blind agency out in America. It's called The Future on YouTube. And it made me change my approach to proposals. When I went into meetings that could have been an hour, 2 hours long, and then you go through the normal prescriptive process of, right, this is who we are, this is why we put this proposal together, these are all the benefits, features, and advantages, blah, 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 blah. And then you get to the last part and says, this is what's going to cost you. And it's at that point you see the client either slump in their chair or lean forward to get an idea. And what Chris talked about, and I actually implemented it off his advice, is within the first 5 minutes of, even when I'm at a meeting or I'm on a phone to somebody, I drop the price in. But I drop the price in as a goalpost. So it will be between this and between that. That way then I can gauge from them, and then as the conversation progresses, whether they think it's a justifiable price. But the art is then I'm justifying the price. Whereas the other way round, I'm giving you everything that you'll chip away at the price and say, I don't want that.
I used to think it was so ridiculous when I was actually selling that I even, as PowerPoint became more sophisticated, we even put a little sound file on the price page that went da-da! But it was a tinny little thing. Or I'd say to people, you know, are you sitting down? Because here comes the price. And because I was so uncomfortable about it, you know. But the funny thing is, and you see this because I've sold retail as well, early career. The funny thing is, you don't actually have to justify the price.
Yeah.
The client has to justify the price, right?
Yes.
You for sure give the customer the justification, and maybe the data or whatever it is. But all purchases are emotional, so you know, to the point where it doesn't make any difference, right? And what we want, we want. And if we can justify it, then so much the better, right? But this is why luxury goods stand up, because you can't justify them, and that's the point.
Yeah.
You know, I've just bought this Ferrari for myself, and I can't justify it. And
no, there's a point of diminishing returns. You know, like you can compare like camera for camera, and then like you know, I've got one and I do some recording of it and stuff, but then I'm never going to be a top end photographer. So why would I go spend way more money for features I'm never going to use? And I think we've seen this play out a lot now, especially during COVID, where we've seen the fashion industry, for instance, where people have said, that's the price point for what I want. I'm only going to wear it once or twice, £5 for a dress, happy with it, chuck it away. And I think I experienced this a couple of years ago when I worked in Tour Attack. We used to have our different price points in there, like between our Krieger and our World One suits. And a World One suit was like £1,200 to buy, and a Krieger was £700. The first question you need to ask the customer or the potential buyer is, so what sort of money have you got to spend? Because if they haven't got £1,200, I'd be wasting my time to tell them all the wonderful features of this, and then get to the point and they say, oh, well, I can't afford that. All right, now we look at the item B. I'm already telling you it's less and it's inferior, but it's adequate enough for the money you're going to spend.
Yeah.
And like from my point of view, yeah, I'd love a Ferrari or Lamborghini, but would I want to drive one every day? No. I'd much prefer a more realistic car, because the expectation is the thing that is built around the price as well. And I kind of know, yes, I mean, and this is absolute gospel, I could buy, within reason, pretty much any vehicle I want to buy. But because I can, doesn't mean I want to. I mean, and like we mentioned earlier, we're of a certain age now where we've had more than enough cars. We kind of know the ones that have been dreams and the ones that have been nightmares. I'm happy enough driving little cars these days. They're reliable, they're cheap to run, and I have money in my pocket to go and do something else. And I've got to that sort of point where, going forward, the kids have reached a certain age, I have a window of opportunity that, from my own perspective, I could spend money in any which way I choose. And I think customers are much more savvy for that, where the mind shift is changing. And a great example of this is, I was looking at cruises, because obviously MSC were in the news last week for overbooking. And I thought, oh, I'll check them out, see what they were doing. And I looked at their ones for the Mediterranean, and I thought, oh, that's quite nice. So I then did, like you said earlier about the brand search, I did Mediterranean cruises, and a whole host of others come up, like Princess Cruises. And they were like £200 per person cheaper. Same cruise, same experience. Will I know I'm going to get the same level of quality? No. But there's enough in there that will already tell me I'm geared to a different price. So I do see a massive mind shift coming. And the last point, just before you jump in, is you're frictionless. I like that idea that the sales funnel is not complete once you've got them across the line. You've got them from community to consumer, but actually then you want them to become an advocate, because there's no better salesperson than an advocate. But whilst you talk about that as the bottom of your flywheel, what sort of elements would you incorporate at the top of the flywheel to sort of keep that motion going?
It's really difficult for old school salespeople to get their heads around, you know, and it's personally been difficult for me, because I'm an old school salesperson, and I do, as I said to you earlier, you know, I do suffer from leaping to the conclusion without necessarily bringing the client with me. So I think it's actually, if you understand that journey that we talked about, the awareness, consideration, and decision journey, it's about trying to add value at the proper part of the journey. It's horrible, another horrible phrase, add value. But you know, at awareness, it means help.
Yeah.
You know, at consideration, it probably means advise. And rather than just spamming, rather than just contacting as many people as you can, you know, just think about it more carefully, and think about has that customer even identified that they have a problem? Because again, you know, from a website perspective, there are lots and lots of people. I would say 90% of websites out there, business websites, are pointless. You know, there's just no point in having them, because they are the brochure website. You know, so I'm not going to stand a chance of driving somebody into inbound marketing and sales, you know, with a marketing type website with lots of interaction and conversion and all that kind of stuff. If they've got a brochure website, then, you know, so as a salesperson, I might look for opportunities to teach that person or to help that person understand why. Yeah. They may actually be wasting a resource there. You know, they're probably not spending very much, and I think that's behind the reason for them to have that brochure website. And they're probably not spending very much and think that's a box ticked. You know, now what I don't do is go up to them and say that website's shit. You know, you don't want to do it like that. You want to do it like this.
You try and find a more
which-
tactile approach.
Yeah, exactly. You want to invite to a webinar, right? You want to put it on social. You want to say to people, do you know, if you've got a brochure website, maybe you should think again.
Yeah.
Maybe you should, or does your brochure website do this and this and this? And then, you know, gradually the inbound approach, gradually encourage them into the top of that funnel or that part of the flywheel. If they're further along,
Yeah.
we can use those tools that we talked about, the Googles, the AdWords, PPC, and paid for social, you know, to say to people, you are searching for a supplier, you are searching for a solution, you are searching for this or that.
Yeah.
We may be able to help you with that. You know, it's really overt then, and that's the most overt I think that can become. You know, you are in the market for this solution. Consider ours for these reasons. So again, not we are better than they are.
No. And I think maybe there's a possibility there with these search engines that whilst you have a search query box and you type that in looking for whatever you're looking for, and then immediately you come back with a page with all the SERPs, is there might be a secondary approach in time where they come back with a more probing question to take you down particular silos, particular niches, and therefore refine the search that a little bit more. So rather than trying to do it on simply one hit wonder, which we know is never the case, because if we equate everything back to human beings, if you were given one question to ask somebody to make that sale, and you're standing in a line of other salesperson, and you're given the opportunity just to ask one question to the consumer to guarantee the sale, my God, you would think about that question long and hard. And that's basically how the premise of the internet is set up. But if you were given the opportunity to ask 2 or 3 questions, then you know there'll be a familiarity between you and the other salespeople, but actually the tangents you'll come off will be way better served. And I think maybe that might be a road that needs to be explored more by the internet as time comes on, so that when we're searching, we're actually given more choices before we're given solutions.
It's an amazing idea, and I think you see self-service, you know, again as a movement, getting stronger and stronger. You know, imagine self-service at the search stage.
Yeah.
So you can know that you know that's not right. That's and you see advanced filters and so on. Technology will solve those problems, but
yes,
from a sales perspective, it's really interesting again, because there is that aspect, that element that I don't know whether it'll ever be able to be captured, and that's the you-ness, you know, your uniqueness.
Yeah.
As a salesperson, right? And I used to teach salespeople, and I used to use this myself, particularly when I was selling media, which was very transactional. You know, who's got the biggest audience and who's the cheapest, and there's some sort of balance in between that. And people would say to me, you know, why should we buy Real Radio rather than Red Dragon, or why should I buy Swansea Sound as it was then, and the Wave rather than Capital or something? And my answer was always because you get me. It's not the product that you're buying, it's me that you're buying, you know, and it's my experience and my advice and my ability and so on and so on. And it never, well, of course it failed. If somebody thought I was an idiot, that's qualifying people out, right? But that's what a great salesperson can offer the client is themselves.
Yeah.
And that's not something that's taught, I don't think, at sales school, you know.
You talk
opens and closes and stuff.
You touched on it earlier, and it compounds exactly what you're saying there. And it's a thing that is sadly missed in the sales marketing process. And it is a cheesy word, but value. It's the value of the years that you've been doing something, the number of projects you've done, the knowledge you've accumulated. You like I see on LinkedIn all the time. You pay me for the years, you don't pay me for the minutes.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of being a little bit more mature down the road. And I do feel that gives me a concerted advantage when I'm up against other agencies to win a client over.
100%.
I've been in positions where things have gone awry, and that always happens. If we're always out that we all come to the game and everything runs lovely and rosy, well, just get it for the cheapest price. But as we know, life and the market always throws a curveball. It's how you manage that steers your brand, and you can either blow your brand up or you can just literally die a death from it. How you manage it makes all the difference. You see that all the time. There's so much, and I think, to be absolutely fair to the consumer these days, and more so the younger consumer, they are way more savvy. They are much more tech orientated. If they're not happy with something, they call it out. They identified, like we mentioned earlier, about seeing a scam online. They'll spot it far quicker than you and I because they're used to these tools. I think if we put them in an alien environment like traditional marketing and go and talk to somebody at an exhibition, they wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
But
yeah.
then that's how the game has changed. You meet more people online than you do in person. Plus, it's a damn sight cheaper. So I think it's our generation that are really learning new tricks and that. But I think we have a stalwart of information to build that on. So value, without doubt, I think I've used that line many a time, is you've got me, you haven't got someone else. Because at the end of the day, if you want somebody to come in, put their feet under your desk, work 9 to 5 and call it a job, that's all well and fine. But if you want somebody to come in with passion, understands what they're doing, and is prepared to move the needle, that's not bound by time, location. And I think that's the wonderful thing I've seen through COVID, is that step change of brands realizing we need to be more streamlined, we need to be more forward thinking, we can do this remotely. But because it's not a level playing field, it's very hard to leverage. COVID has had the benefit of that, of forcing everyone to do something and reinvent their business models. And just in the last year, I've dealt with my insurance, my bank, my broadband provider, and it's all been individuals working from home, but supported by the company. And I think that evolution of how we're moving forward in sales predominantly and marketing, I think is where we should be more focused. I would like to think education would come along for that ride as well, because sadly that's been lacking for decades. But it takes change management, COVID being the case here, for something like that to happen. But we're just coming up to the end of the hour. Just before we go, some sort of key takeaways from this about not being pushy with our sales and things that you think will resonate with the target audience out there.
Yeah, we've covered some big themes, big ideas. We've talked about in some detail as well, but that relationship or trust that we talked about is huge. And we see brands increasingly moving that way themselves, to create authentic experiences for their consumers, and to be there for their consumers. Nike would be a good example, and to be consistent for the consumer, right? So the same thing goes for the salesperson. So that kind of trust and that relationship with your community, as you called it, with the people that buy from you, that's absolutely going to be massive. And for me, thinking about the alignment with the consumer, or the idea of frictionless sales, enablement for the salesperson, education and tools for the salesperson, but also aligning with the customer success. That I would absolutely, for any, particularly if they're at the other end of the career spectrum to us, and people who I've trained lots and lots of 20-something and 30-something salespeople, and they do worry about not having the gravitas of somebody who's been doing it for a long time. And that's where your brand does come in. That's where you're able to say, look, I don't know, but I know I can find out. And I'm working with Andy, who he will have the answer, and I'm working with Tony, who I can bring in to support us. So the same wires can be pulled for those younger guys as well, the ones perhaps without the reputations, without that level of experience. So definitely that trust / relationship / community vibe, and then the alignment, particularly around this idea of removing friction for the customer, make it easier for the customer to buy. That's what I would like people to think. That's what that chat was about.
No, I totally agree. I think, like you said, there with the 20 and 30-year-olds, I have that when I'm doing the teaching. I do feel that I do have a moral obligation to ensure that the digital marketers that I'm helping, build their careers and their knowledge from my experience, they're not just simply gaining certification, they're gaining real value. And I do say it as I see it, because even from my own point of view, I hold the mirror to myself. I don't know it all. I'm still learning every single day. But what I do know is I have a stalwart of projects I've worked on that give me some experience to draw back on. But there's so much more I'm going to be learning over the next couple of years that I'm just constantly going to keep an open mind and therefore keep adapting to it. Well, thanks, Tony. They've been really enjoyable. I think, wow, we've covered some topics there quietly.
We have been around the world.
I mean, a few acronyms in there as well. But yeah, it's it is. I mean, you're on the same page as me, and I do think that sales per se for the next 5 to 10 years, I think will be quite interesting. Yes, they'll be heavily led by the internet, and as we know, bricks and mortars. I heart for them, but I don't see the high street ever coming back, because where's the intent? And if you can't make it financially viable as it is on the internet, it's never going to happen, to be honest. And I see more and more businesses shifting that way. And that's probably not a bad thing for the moment, but I think where will we be in 5, 10 years? If we're all buying online, where's the pleasure? And there is a pleasure from the tactile process of going out, looking at some clothes and saying, yeah, that's not for me, as opposed to just, sliding on your phone and looking at them. But time will tell.
That'll be the next conversation.
That'll be the next conversation. Lovely. All right. Well, many thanks, Tony. Have a good day, and I'll see you again. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for watching this video, and a big thank you out to my collaborator today, Tony Dowling. Really do appreciate his insight into a frictionless selling process and not being too salesy when it comes to doing your selling. If you wish to find out more about Tony's journey, please click on his website, realinbound.co.uk. There will be a link in the description below. Likewise, if you want to follow more information or more podcasts in the Insight Before Action channel, please click the like, subscribe below and the notification button, and I'll make sure that I keep you informed of the next videos as they come out. And again, thank you very much.